Agent Peters! State agent!
Need backup! We need backup!
Fall back! Fall back now!
My garage was never just a garage. It was my sanctuary, my escape hatch from a world that had stopped making sense years ago. When I stepped inside and pulled that steel door down, the chaos outside went silent. The world shrank to a handful of tools, the smell of motor oil, and the slow heartbeat of my '67 Mustang resting under the lights. You know that feeling when something finally fits, when every sound, every click of a wrench lines up with your pulse? That was me, every evening, just a man and his machine, chasing order in a world built on noise. That night started like any other. The air drifting off the lake was cool, carrying the faint scent of pine and wet asphalt, the kind of night that begged for quiet. I remember tightening the lug nuts on the rear wheel, listening to that satisfying rhythm, click, click, click. That sound was my therapy, my control. Everything outside my garage walls might have been crumbling, but in here, everything had its place, even the ghosts. Then came the hum. Low, expensive, deliberate, not the growl of a pickup or the rattle of a neighbor's minivan. No, this was smoother. Government smooth. I looked up through the narrow side window and saw headlights slicing through the mist. A black sedan eased up my driveway, its paint drinking in the light like ink. The engine cut off. Two men stepped out, wearing dark suits, sharp haircuts, and that quiet confidence that said, "We're not here for small talk." I wiped my hands on a red rag, trying to steady my heartbeat. They didn't have to say a word, I already knew. I'd been waiting for this moment ever since I sent those files. A manila envelope full of photocopies, maps, and bank records. Proof that the so-called Lakeside Community Restoration Project wasn't restoration at all. It was a cover-up. A real estate scam wrapped in HOA bylaws, signed by our charming, vindictive president, Karen Polson. You ever met someone who smiles while stabbing you with rules? That's Karen, the queen of fake civility. And now, her empire was about to crack. The taller agent approached first, flashing a badge so quick it barely caught the light. Mr. Dunham? That's me. I'm Agent Peters. That's Cross. Governor Thompson asked to meet you personally. He's reviewing your evidence. The governor. Not some investigator, not a county bureaucrat, the top man himself. My throat went dry. If he was showing up here, this thing was bigger than HOA fines and fence heights. I glanced at the car again. The back door opened, and there he was, Governor Thompson. Mr. Dunham, the governor said, stepping forward. You've been busy. What you uncovered connects to something we've been chasing for a long time. That moment, it felt like oxygen after years underwater. I'd done it. I'd exposed her. Karen, with her smug HOA meetings and her phony community newsletters, was finished. The balance of power had finally tipped. But fate has a cruel sense of timing, because just as the governor took another step toward me, the night exploded in a flash of red and blue. Sirens screamed. Tires screeched. Patrol cars barreled down our quiet cul-de-sac like a stampede of steel and adrenaline. The driveway filled with flashing lights, megaphones, and guns. Show me your hands. Get down now. Possible armed suspect inside. For a moment, nobody moved. The governor's detail tensed, hands on their weapons but not drawing. They were trained for this. But the local cops? They were wired tight, jittery, shouting over one another. And then I heard it over the chaos. One voice on a police radio. Caller reports the suspects armed. Possible explosives. Hostile intent. My stomach dropped. Karen. She wasn't just playing HOA games anymore. She'd gone nuclear. She'd called the cops, told them I was dangerous. She'd staged the perfect setup. The whistleblower framed as a threat. Agent Peters raised his badge and yelled, "Stand down! State detail! Stand down!" But the local officers didn't hear, or didn't care. They saw three men, one of them powerful, one holding a gun, one me standing in a garage that suddenly looked like a battlefield. Then came the rookie. Couldn't have been more than 20. His hands were shaking, his pistol raised. His face was pale, eyes darting like a trapped animal. He shouted something I couldn't even process. Then he stepped forward onto the slick patch of oil under the Mustang. Time fractured. His boot slipped, his body twisted, his finger tightened, and the gun went off. The sound was a single, brutal crack that ripped through the night. The lights flashed white, then blue again. For half a second, nobody breathed. Then the governor staggered. His hand went to his side, and the white of his shirt bloomed red. Agent Peters caught him before he fell. The rookie froze, his gun hanging uselessly. His lips moved, but all that came out was, "I slipped. Oh God, I slipped." And just like that, my garage, the one place in the world that had always been clean, orderly, safe, was painted with blood. The governor's blood. Chaos erupted. Shouts, radios, running boots. The local sergeant barked orders, trying to regain control, but his voice was lost in the storm. The state agents moved fast. Radio calls, medical kits, code names. "Eagle down," one said. Repeat, "Eagle down. Need medevac." And Karen dear, poisonous Karen, was still standing there, frozen now, her face drained of color. That smugness evaporated, because she realized the setup she'd built to destroy me had just backfired in the most catastrophic way possible. Her false call had triggered a gunshot that wounded the most powerful man in the state. And from that moment, she was finished. The state medic didn't look up. His voice cut through the panic like a blade. "Sergeant, your officer just shot the governor. Every second you waste arguing is another second he bleeds. Now move." And somehow, that did it. The shouting stopped. The local cops backed off. A perimeter formed. My driveway turned into a command center. I stood there, paralyzed. My wife, Tina, had appeared in the doorway, one hand over her mouth, her eyes wide and wet. I could hear neighbors whispering from behind fences, their phones raised, filming what would be tomorrow's top headline: "Governor shot in HOA neighborhood." Then the medic looked up, eyes locking on me. "You garage owner, get over here." I blinked. "Me?" "Yes, you. Your hands look steady. I need pressure here, now." For a split second, my brain refused. This wasn't supposed to be my job, but then instinct took over. Procedure. Step by step. That's how I lived. That's how I survived. I knelt beside the governor, pressing my hands to the wound. The warmth of his blood soaked through the gauze, sticky and hot. I could hear the faint rasp of his breathing, the medic barking instructions, the faraway thrum of helicopters being called in. Minutes dragged like hours. The medevac arrived, the rotors thundering overhead, blowing dust and oil-stained air through the open garage. They lifted the governor out, leaving behind a streak of blood and silence. The agents followed. The local cops stayed, heads bowed, faces pale. And Karen, she had vanished inside her house, curtains drawn tight. When the last vehicle pulled away, the night went dead still again. The garage was a mess. My floor, once spotless, was smeared with red and black. The smell of oil and blood mingled into something I'll never forget. The news broke before sunrise. Governor Thompson injured in accidental shooting investigation underway. The words accidental and shooting don't belong in the same sentence, but that's politics for you. By morning, my driveway was crawling with reporters. By noon, the state attorney's office had declared an official inquiry. By sunset, the HOA board had temporarily suspended operations pending review. Translation: Karen was hiding. But the story didn't end there. See, when the governor's team recovered the briefcase, they found everything I'd collected and more. Turns out, my files linked directly to a massive laundering network running through construction contracts tied to the HOA. Millions in state funds. Bribes. Illegal zoning. Every signature led straight to Karen and her developer friend. Within days, the arrests started. Quiet at first. Then, public. Karen's picture was everywhere, handcuffed, hair a mess, tears streaking her designer makeup. The same woman who once fined me for leaving my trash bins out for too long. But here's the thing they don't tell you about justice: it's never clean. The governor survived. Barely. The rookie officer was discharged, haunted for life. And me? I became the guy whose garage turned into ground zero for a political firestorm. Sometimes I stand there late at night, staring at the stains on the concrete that no cleaner could ever remove. They remind me that even the smallest flaw, a missed oil spot, a broken rule, a single phone call can tear through lives like a bullet through glass. The world doesn't fall apart all at once. It unravels quietly, bolt by bolt, rule by rule, lie by lie, until the only sound left is the click, click, click of a wrench, echoing in a garage that used to make sense. The SUV door slammed and the outside world snapped to mute, like someone had thrown a blanket over a screaming crowd. Inside, recycled leather smell, radio crackle, a faint rattle from the partition. I held the briefcase like a life raft. Agent Peters sat across from me, knees squared, eyes never leaving mine. "Breathe," he said. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until the air left my lungs in a ragged rush. We pulled away from the cul-de-sac. The ambulance ahead of us, carving a tunnel through red lights. A helicopter curved overhead like a dark gull. I watched the neighborhood recede Karen's house, the manicured lawn, the stunned faces. You ever see the moment a stage illusion breaks and the crowd knows it's been conned? That's what our street looked like, the curtain ripped wide open. "Walk me through your evidence," Peter said, voice low, all business, no judgment. Parcel maps with altered overlays, HOA assessments inflated to match kickback payments, shell LLCs tied to the developer, and a silent partner routing money through a landscaping contract that never existed. My voice steadied as I talked. It always did when I could name things, label them, pin them to a board. And if you pull water usage logs on the restoration zone addresses, you'll find half of them are ghost properties paying into a slush fund via fraudulent meter accounts. Peters nodded once, like a metronome. "You kept originals?" "Scanned everything. Originals in a fireproof safe. Redundant backups. Off-site." He tapped his comms, murmuring coordinates. The SUV glided off the highway into a low building with no signage, the kind of place that collects stories without ever telling one. Inside, the lighting was bright but not harsh. People moved like chess pieces, fast, precise, quiet. They ushered me into a room that smelled like printer, toner, and coffee that's been working overtime. A woman with sharp eyes and a ponytail introduced herself as Alvarez State Investigator, Financial Crimes. She set a recorder on the table, but her eyes stayed on me, not the red light. We went from lot lines to bank microdeposits to a plumbing contractor that listed a P.O. box inside a UPS store that didn't exist the year on the invoice. The more I spoke, the calmer I felt. Procedure is a mercy if you let it be. Half an hour in, a door opened without knocking. Cross leaned in, face like bedrock. "Update." He aimed his words at Peters, but he let me hear them. "Governor is out of surgery, stabilized, no organ perforation, will need transfusions. He asked for a briefing when he's lucid." The room exhaled. I reached for a water bottle with hands that were still stained at the creases. The cold plastic shocked me back into my body. "What happens to the rookie?" I asked. Peters answered, without flinching. "He's under observation. He'll be interviewed with counsel present. Body cam and the broadcast you and your wife displayed corroborate a slip and discharge under stress. A beat. We will not let him be the fall guy for a malicious call." That last line wasn't for the recorder, it was for me. Alvarez angled her laptop. "This is the developer's landscaping LLC. We just got expedited subpoenas on their merchant accounts. The billing descriptors are inconsistent with horticulture vendors. They match construction, grading, rentals, and political consulting." "Political consulting," I repeated, tasting the rot. "By the board, by the bylaws, by the vote. And silence anyone who can count to 10, Alvarez said. A knock. Tina stepped in like she'd been invited, which, based on the 2 agents shadowing her, she had. She was still pale, but that flint in her eyes burned bright. She put a thumb drive on the table. Mirror of the body cam cache, the cruiser synced while parked outside, also the 911 voice print. I ran a quick and dirty match on Karen's voice against HOA, zooms, the spectral graphing is a 96% match, even through her fake panic tenor. Alvarez stared at Tina the way chess players study a queen that appeared from a pawn. Peters hid a smile with a cough. Chain of custody? I recorded a live screen capture with timestamp overlay and hash, then I copied raw files. You'll still want to get them again through proper warrants, but this preserves a first-look snapshot before anything accidentally overwrites in the field. Alvarez slid the drive into a right-blocked reader like it was a relic. The room shifted gears, technicians appeared, screens bloomed. The red line on the recorder kept eating the moment. You could feel the narrative waking up and choosing a new direction. Where's Karen? I asked. Cross answered. Inside her house. Attorney on scene. She has not left the property. He paused, eyelids lowering. Yet, then we move, Alvarez said. Malicious false report causing great bodily harm, obstructing governmental administration, wire fraud predicates, conspiracy, racketeering exposure if the HOA acts as an enterprise. We lace it to financial crime and public corruption, and we take her clean. She looked at Peters. But we do it by the book, no theatrics. They set me up in a second room to sign a statement draft. Tina hovered just outside, talking in a tight cluster with a calm woman from the state police who radiated competence like a space heater. Through the glass, I watched Alvarez and a prosecutor coordinate on a video call, swapping exhibits like playing cards. The words probable cause and exigent and non-consensual entry floated even with the door shut. The machine of justice was clearing its throat. When I finished my signature streak, Peters slid a small device across to me. Temporary protective. Think of it as a panic transmitter. If someone tries to make you go quiet, you press and hold. Units respond. Understood? Someone? I said. He didn't blink. You compromised a revenue engine. People like Karen are the friendly mask on a face with teeth. I pocketed the transmitter. And the developer? Running, Alvarez said from the doorway. They prepped a convoy. Not the siren kind. This was quieter. Warrant team. Document seizure, digital forensics. A separate car would escort Tina home to pack a bag and change clothes. Then she'd be brought to a safe location. I was assigned 2 agents and a seat behind tinted glass. You ever ride in a car that feels like a verdict? That's what the back seat felt like. Cool, decisive, inevitable. We rolled back into the neighborhood under a sky with edges. News vans had multiplied like mushrooms after rain. The cul-de-sac, recently a battlefield, now looked like a carnival of tripods and moral outrage. Neighbors clustered in little islands of theory. Ed stood with a notebook like his whole life had been leading to this moment. Karen's porch light was on. She stood at the top of the steps with a lawyer who had the posture of a man who invoices by the ounce of patience. She wore a shawl like a costume piece for innocent dignity. The team moved with choreography that had been practiced 1,000 times in buildings without windows. Alvarez read the warrant, the lawyer protested. A sergeant in a crisp campaign hat kept everyone at a respectful distance. When Karen tried to play Queen Bee, I am the president of this HOA, and Alvarez cued a body cam and said, with courtroom clarity, you were. Step aside. And here's where the air changed. Tina, standing in our driveway with a tablet, activated the mirroring again. The TV in our living room door still open, soundbar still hungry, filled the street with Karen's own voice. The 911 call. Alvarez didn't smirk. Professionals don't need smirks. She simply said, Miss Polson, place your hands behind your back. Karen's mouth moved, but no sound came. When sound finally found her, it came out thin. I was protecting the community. You endangered the governor, Alvarez answered, cuffing with the soft efficiency of someone tying a ribbon. You endangered everyone." The cuffs clicked. The neighborhood learned a new sound. As Karen was guided down the steps, Peters turned to me. This is not the finish line. Inside Karen's home, boxes bloomed open like midnight flowers. Laptops went into Faraday bags. File drawers surrendered ledgers with neat columns that would look very ugly under sunlight. A safe yielded a velvet pouch of rings and a thumb drive engraved with a date. Someone said bingo in a tone that belonged in a monastery, not Vegas. Across the street, Ed approached me like a diplomat. "Josh," he said, voice wobbling between apology and awe. I always thought you were exaggerating." "It's okay, Ed." And it was. He'd been running on bylaws. He'd never learned to smell gasoline. The first news push alert hit our phones while evidence techs were still cataloging succulents. Karen never watered herself. Governor stabilized. 911 call was fabricated. HOA president in custody. The subhead mentioned community hero provides key evidence. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a man who missed an oil stain. Night bled into morning. The sky found its pinks again. A state trooper handed me a cup of coffee that tasted like burnt miracles. Tina leaned on my shoulder, just enough weight to remind me that gravity still worked. "Developers in custody," he said. Try as he might, he couldn't outdrive license plate readers. He had 2 phones in a potato chip bag. He thinks that's how Faraday cages work. Tina actually laughed short, bright, defiant. The sound made 3 evidence techs smile at their shoes. "What about the board?" I asked. 2 resignations filed over email, Alvarez said, stepping out with a folder. One board member self-reported a gift card scheme that's going to look very cooperative to a judge. The treasurer's already flipped. There's a ledger with names and offsets. I opened to a photocopy of a check. Memo. Community outreach. Amount. Obscene. Signature. A city councilman I'd shaken hands with last summer at a ribbon cutting nobody asked for. Peters watched my face like a seismograph. "This is where the floor drops," he said softly. "You did not start a neighborhood feud, Mr. Dunham. You opened a door in a house with many rooms." I closed the folder. "Then let's walk." By afternoon, the governor's staff released a brief statement. He thanked the private citizen whose quick action and steadfast integrity aided in both my care and the exposure of a dangerous fraud. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. The phone started buzzing like a jar of angry bees, reporters, friends, people I hadn't heard from since college. I turned it face down and let the soundbar fill the house with classical music like a joke, only I found funny. When the sun tilted, Peters asked me for a favor that didn't sound like one. "We need you to speak at a short presser," he said. "Controlled pool, 30 seconds, no questions. We want to anchor the narrative to fact before it grows a tail." I hate cameras. I love truth more, so I said yes. We set up in the driveway. The Mustang framed behind me like a paradox, a beauty that birthed a bloodstain. The statement was simple. I told the timeline. I thanked the medic and the officers who steadied the spiral. I said the governor was alive because professionals refuse to panic. And I said lies have a velocity that can kill if you let them run. A reporter broke protocol and shouted, "Why would an HOA president do this?" Peters started to step in. I answered first, because sometimes plain talk beats polished talk. Because power feels small when you get it by cheating, I said, and small power is always afraid. The clip did what clips do. It hopped, it looped, it turned into text, and then opinion. Some people tried to make it partisan. Most people just watched a suburban house and realized monsters don't always live under beds. Sometimes they chair meetings. That night, we didn't sleep at home. State put us in a hotel with bland art and linens that smelled like nothing, which is better than smelling like everything. Tina showered twice, once for the news cycle, once for the blood. I sat at the tiny desk and pulled the briefcase closer again, even though its contents had been cloned half a dozen times since morning. Habit is a poor lullaby, but it hums. "Do you regret it?" Tina asked from the bed, hair damp, eyes soft but sharp. She never asks soft questions. She asks precise ones. "No," I said. I regret not cleaning the oil. Morning arrived, disguised as a knock. Cross, stoic as ever, stood in the hall with a disposable cup and a file. "Governor wants to see you," he said. He asked for the man who kept pressure when it counted. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and hope. Outside the room, security formed a soft wall that could turn hard at a whisper. Inside, the governor looked human wires, monitor beeps, a tired smile that didn't need a podium. He took my hand with care and still squeezed like a promise. "You saved my life," he said. "Then you saved my state some dignity." When we left, a reporter in the corridor asked me if a garage could still be a sanctuary after all this. I thought about the oil stain. I thought about the click, click, click of a torque wrench and the thump of a desperate pulse under my palms. "Yes," I said. "But sanctuaries need doors, and doors need to open when neighbors knock." We drove home at dusk. The street felt wider. Ed waved us down and handed me a stack of printed bylaws with yellow highlights like a truce flag. "Town Hall, Friday," he said. "Real one. Not the kind with cookies and hidden agendas. You're speaking first." We pulled into the driveway. The garage door lifted with its old familiar groan. The Mustang waited like a friend who saw everything and refused to judge. There was a new light over the workbench. Tina had installed it, bright and clear, no shadows for oil to hide in. On the floor, faint and stubborn, the stain still marked where chaos slipped. I stepped in, laid a palm on cool metal, and let the quiet settle. If you've made it this far, you know the story's not neat. It never is. There will be hearings and indictments and op-eds from people who've never smelled brake fluid. I hung my belt on the pegboard next to the half-inch drive, one more tool in the right place. The world beyond the door can do what it wants. In here, we count, we label, we tighten until things hold. And when the next lie decides it wants our home for a stage, we'll switch on the lights, open the door, and let the truth speak at full volume. You keep pressure where it counts. You don't drift. And you don't let up, no matter what. The hospital's private wing swallowed sound the way a padded studio swallows echoes. Everything was crisp edges and sterilized air. The only chaos allowed in here lived in the heart monitors. Peters drove like a metronome, no wasted motion, no hard turns, while cross-fed clean, surgical sentences into the radio. I kept a palm on the briefcase the whole way, as if it could sense fear and try to bolt. If proof can hum, this one did. Low, electric, dangerous. They threaded us past the normal ER traffic through a service corridor that smelled like bleach and burned coffee, then keyed open a door into a secure suite where suits moved like chess pieces and no one asked why. The governor vanished behind double doors with a red bar of light and the word surgery. "Missed organs," someone said. "Lucky," someone else answered, the kind of luck that gets measured in millimeters and minutes. The waiting room had no windows and too many chairs. Anxiety sat in every empty seat anyway. Peters took the corner with the line of sight on both the door and me. Jaw clenched, hands still, eyes that didn't blink unless they had to. I didn't try to fill the silence. Some silences do a job. An hour later, the door opened on a woman with a comet tail of authority behind her, tailored suit, hair disciplined into a knot that had seen 3 crises today already and was taking a 4th. Chief of Staff. She and Peters traded low-toned logistics, the kind people make when they're sentencing chaos to order. "Mr. Dunham," she said gently, and it hit like a gavel. "The medic says, your hands bought us time." Her gaze slid to the briefcase. "And your papers may explain why we ran out of it." The latch on the case felt heavier than metal. I opened it anyway, laid the guts on the coffee table like a mechanic spreads parts on a clean towel. Maps first, the honest county plat, and the HOA's glossy lie. "This is what we bought," I said, finger tracking the skinny veins of community access down to the water. "And this is what we were shown. 50 houses, 50 shaves, 1 private ribbon of lake. A fortune made out of the negative space between our deeds. Invoices," I said, feeding the next stack into the light. "Line items with adjectives that do a lot of work when they're hiding a vacuum. Mitigation, analysis, beautification, numbers engineered to be just boring enough that no one asks why grass costs as much as a car. Work not done, I said. Or done by a teenager with a weed trimmer and a Venmo. Then, the account statement's shell company, with a paper trail that pretended to be smoke, deposits marching in lockstep with those HOA payments. The incorporation doc with a name that looked wrong on purpose and still managed to be exactly right. Karen Polson. Kickbacks, I said, and the room didn't flinch because the word had been waiting there the whole time. She wasn't guarding the neighborhood, she was cashing it out. Peters let out a breath like a low whistle. Chief of Staff's eyes widened by half a blink, less shock than confirmation, the kind leaders show when their worst hunch stands up and raises a hand. Get this logged and secured, she said, and to me, we'll be precise. Tonight gets smaller if we're precise. They routed me into a deposition room with carpet meant to absorb guilt and coffee meant to weaponize sobriety. Alvarez took the far chair, fingers already flying, a recorder's red eye watching us blink. Halfway through, Cross cracked the door. Update, he said to Peters. Out of surgery. No organ hits. Stabilized. He'll brief when he's lucid. We all took a breath that felt like we'd been holding it since the sirens. The governor lived. The truth lived. Now we had to make both count. We were headed for the attached garage, Peters in front, me with the case, the echo of our footsteps arguing with the concrete when he stepped out from behind a column like a stage entrance he'd practiced since prep school. Tailored suit, perfect silver hair, smile trained to disarm a bank vault. He held up his hands like he cared about our comfort. Some men introduce themselves by expecting you to already know. Richard Thorne didn't have to expect. I knew. Gentlemen, he said, voice buttered and warm. A misunderstanding turned tragedy. I only wanted to offer condolences. His eyes never met mine. They met the briefcase. Predators don't look at faces when they're hungry. Leave, Peters said. One word. No garnish. Thorne kept the smile, dropped the pretense. Mr. Dunham has been through a lot. I'd be happy to safeguard his burdens, just until the smoke clears. He moved fast. Money often does. He grabbed the handle with manicured confidence and found out what it felt like when a thing bites back. For a heartbeat, we were a three-person machine, his greed, my grip, Peters' motion vectoring to intercept. I let go with one hand, pivoted. No haymaker, just a short, ugly punch delivered by a man whose body had learned all night to press hard and not drift. Knuckles met jaw. His eyes flashed surprise before his knees confessed gravity. Troopers poured in. They didn't need the rest of the story. They could smell it. Cuffs clicked. Luxury wrinkled on concrete. Peters looked at my hand, and something like a smile visited his mouth. Nice right hook? Left, I said, suddenly tired enough to sleep on rebar. Thorne bleeding pride in a hospital parking garage should have felt like a climax. It felt like a prologue. Fixers fix. Snake's author. Karen wasn't the hired hand. She was the handwriting. She was still behind her door, lawyering up, counting whatever she thought counted. They booked Thorne and bagged his phone like a poisonous insect. Alvarez sent a warrant team to his offices with instructions tight enough to play in court without a second note. On the ride to the state barracks, the briefcase sat in my lap like a verdict with a handle. Cross cleared his throat. He came at you. You defended property. That is now our chain of custody. I hit a rich guy, I said. You hit obstruction, he replied. The rich guy just came free with the set. The barracks didn't look like TV. They rarely do. No oak panels, no flags posing for cameras, just paint that chose to be practical and glass that had been cleaned by people who respected their jobs. They printed my hands not as a suspect, as a witness who'd handled history. While the ink dried, Alvarez floated in with a printout. We've got a mapping consultant we can flip, she said, almost conversational. He altered those parcels for a pilot visualization and then signed an NDA. He thinks NDAs are holy writ. He's about to find out what subpoenas are. Will they say Karen didn't know the map was different? Tina asked. appearing at my shoulder like she'd always been assigned there. She looked like she'd watched two worlds break and was still ready to do math. "They will try," Alvarez said, but Karen signed 3 letters describing the access adjustments as finalized. Her metadata says she wrote that sentence herself. Peter's radio buzzed. He turned away, listened without blinking, then came back with a look I had started to trust. Judge-approved primary and secondary warrants were moving on Karen's residence and on Thorne's satellite office downtown. We slid into the convoy's middle car and watched the city reassemble from night into thin morning. My neighborhood arrived like a bad dream on rerun cameras, neighbors spinning theories like cotton candy, someone selling coffee for $5 and forgiveness for free. Karen's porch was a set. Her lawyer played lead. He'd changed ties. His tone stayed the same, concerned, reasonable, inflated with the helium of billable hours. Alvarez did not perform. She worked. Warrant read. Entry made. Evidence technicians with gloves the color of patience moved through rooms and opened boxes that were supposed to stay shut forever. In the study, a safe gave up a ledger with a cover that tried very hard to be boring. Inside, numbers that were not boring at all. Transfers that matched our fake invoices down to the penny. A thumb drive in a velvet pouch engraved with a date that matched one of the beautification payments. An envelope with a city councilman's office seal and a thank you for your leadership note clipped to a check. Some rot writes in, fountain pen. Karen stood rigid, voice honed for HOA podiums. "This is harassment," she managed. But the room had a new gravity. Her words didn't travel far. The chief of staff arrived like a storm front, controlled and purposeful. She took a quick inventory with her eyes and then focused on me. "The governor is awake," she said softly. He asked for the man who refused to drift. We traded one convoy for another. In the hospital room, the governor looked like a man who had shaken hands with pain and negotiated terms. Wires hummed. Monitors did their synchronized lullaby. He took my hand like it was part of a ritual that kept the world straight. "You kept pressure," he said. "Then you applied it elsewhere." A ghost of a smile. "We'll need both." I told him what we'd found in simple nouns. Maps, invoices, ledgers, calls. He nodded in short, clipped beats. "The way you store instructions you mean to execute." When I finished, he closed his eyes for a count of 3, opened them, and said, "We will not let small-time corruption teach big-time lessons." It sounded like policy and prayer at the same time. Back in the hall, we passed the rookie on a bench, flanked by a union rep and a chaplain with tired eyes. He looked 19 again, knees touching, hands quiet, face learning that 1 second can have a lifetime in it. I stopped long enough to meet his gaze. "It was a slip," I said. "The world should have been quieter when you walked in." He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "because men apologize for gravity when it makes them fall." I nodded. "Get the help," I said. "Take it, even if they say you don't need it." By late afternoon, the first press releases landed like controlled detonations. The governor's team thanked first responders, confirmed stability, promised transparency. The state AG announced charges against an HOA official and associates tied to fraudulent parcel manipulation and wire fraud. The phrase malicious false report did not blink. In the evidence lab, technicians cracked Karen's thumb drive without breaking a sweat. Inside, a spreadsheet labeled Lake Project Tracker with tabs that named people the way storms name themselves. A column for offsets divided by considerations, another for community messaging, and a note beside my last name, non-compliant, watch spouse, tech savvy. Evening brought a different kind of knock. Peter stood in the doorway of the conference room with a folder and an expression that meant something had been both worse and better than expected. Thorne flipped, he said. Not all the way, enough to point at bigger money. He thought he built a private beach. He was a plank in a pier that runs into City Hall. I looked at the governor's thank you note on the table, and then at the stain I could still see on my hands when I closed my eyes. How high? I asked. As high as people who smile in photo ops and call it service, Alvarez said, joining us. But let's enjoy small victories on the way to big fights. A judge just signed a preservation order for the body cam servers you tapped. Your early mirror will keep certain stories honest when they get tempted to change clothes. We went home under a sky that had finally decided what color it wanted to be. The garage door lifted and the light Tina had installed earlier blazed down without mercy. The oil stain was still there, a faded bruise on concrete. I didn't clean it. Not yet. Neighbors waved awkwardly, the way people do who used to argue about trash day and now know the word racketeering. Ed crossed the lawn like he was walking on a new planet and handed me a flyer. Town Hall Real one Friday. We're doing it right, he said. Agenda posted, speakers timed, cookies by donation, not by decree. He looked at the Mustang, then at me. You'll open? I hate microphones, I said out of habit. You love torque specs, he countered. Just pretend the crowd is a wheel and you're getting them to 100 foot-pound snug, then click. That night, we didn't turn on the news. We sat on the floor with takeout cartons and let the house breathe. The briefcase was empty on the table, its contents multiplied and distributed like seeds. Peters texted a 3-word update, Karen in custody. I stared at it too long, not because I doubted, but because the human brain sometimes needs to see justice written down like it's finally learned to write. Do you regret any of it? Tina asked. I regret not painting the floor, I said. High grit epoxy, anti-slip aggregate. She leaned her head on my shoulder. We'll paint it together, she murmured. After the town hall, after the depositions, after whatever comes next. Whatever came next arrived sooner than sleep. A secure call from the chief of staff. The governor wanted a short statement filmed not me at a podium, just me in the garage, telling the truth in words that don't need graphics. Peters set it up with a 2-person crew who treated our home like sacred ground. We kept it tight. I described maps and inches and how little lies add up to big thefts. I said professionals saved a life because they refused to panic. They left with footage. We stayed with the quiet. The Mustang's paint threw back the work light in a green that looked like patience. When I finally closed my eyes, the night replayed itself in fragments. The slip, the crack, the pressure, the belt, the audio blooming from our living room like judgment. The rookie's ghost white face, the helicopter's thunder, Thorne's perfume cloud, the clean snap of cuffs, the governor's hand in mine. Somewhere in there, I slept. Morning showed up with coffee and momentum. Alvarez texted, Warren served council office, consultancy banker. Peters added, keep moving divided by don't drift. The town hall flyer multiplied on our block like mushrooms after rain. Ed had found a laminator. Of course he had. I went out to the garage and stood in the rectangle of light. The stain was there, yes, but so were the outlines I'd drawn years ago around each wrench. I hung my belt next to the half-inch drive again. Muscle memory reaches for the right tool if you give it a chance. If you're listening, if any of this turns into the video, your thumb hovered over at 2 a.m. Here's what matters more than the sirens and the headlines. Small corrections save big lives. Keep pressure where it counts. Name things. Count inches. Tell the truth fast. And when someone smiles while stealing your shoreline, don't argue about tone. Turn on the lights. Roll the footage. Let the neighborhood hear the call that tried to script their fear. We had the fixer. We had the papers. The snake was still coiled in a house with good curtains. But the room was brighter now, and snakes don't love light. The next few days were a blur of depositions, witness statements, and endless cups of bad coffee in sterile government offices. The state police had put Tina and me up in a hotel for our own safety, though it felt more like a comfortable prison. The governor was out of surgery and stable, which was a relief that felt physical, like a weight being lifted off my chest. The state's case against Thorne and Karen was building into an ironclad fortress. They had my evidence, they had Thorne's failed attempt to steal it, and they had Karen's fraudulent 911 call. It was Tina who decided we couldn't just wait. She was sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, scrolling through a PDF of the HOA bylaws on her tablet. It was a document thicker than a phone book, a testament to Karen's obsession with control. "You know," she said, a wicked little glimmer in her eye that I knew all too well. "While the wheels of actual justice are turning, I feel like a little community standards enforcement is in order." I raised an eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" She grinned. "Karen built this little kingdom with these rules. She used them as a weapon against everyone. It's time the weapon was aimed back at the throne." And so began Tina's campaign of glorious, lawful, petty revenge. It started small. Tina had a friend on the lake, another homeowner who was fed up with Karen, drive by her house and take a few pictures. The first violation notice was emailed to the official HOA inbox with a carbon copy to every single homeowner. Subject: Notice of violation. Bylaw 7.4. Exterior color palette. Dear Miss Plays, 140 Zio. Polson. It has come to our attention that the decorative welcome sign on your porch is painted country blue. As per the approved community color palette outlined in Bylaw 7.4, only Patriot Blue or Midnight Blue are permitted. Please remedy this violation within 48 hours to avoid a daily fine of $25. It was Bylaw 11.2, Waste Receptacle Placement. Karen, in her haste and distress, had left her garbage and recycling bins at the curb for 3 hours past the designated 8 p.m. cutoff time. Another email went out, complete with a time-stamped photo. A fine of $50 has been assessed to your account. This was followed by a citation for Bylaw 9.1, Unseasonal Decorations. A small decorative flag with a pumpkin on it, left over from the previous fall, was still hanging from her mailbox. Please be advised that autumnal decorations are only permitted between September 15th and November 30th. A fine of $15 will be assessed. Each email was a work of art, a perfect imitation of the cold, condescending notices Karen had been sending out for years. Tina was using Karen's own words, her own rules, her own fee structure against her, and she was doing it all legally, by the book Karen herself had written. While Tina was waging her war of 1,000 paper cuts, I was taking the more direct route. I spent my days on the phone with the state investigators, but I also spent my evenings drafting formal complaints to the Rump HOA board. I filed a motion for an emergency meeting to discuss the president's conduct. The breaking point came about a week into our campaign. We were back home, the state police having finally decided the threat was contained. We were sitting on our porch when we saw Karen storm out of her house. She marched across her lawn and stood at the edge of our property, her face blotchy and her hair a mess. She had clearly snapped. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" She screamed, her voice cracking, sending me these stupid emails, fining me for my flag. Tina and I just sat there, sipping our iced tea. We didn't say a word. Her meltdown was magnificent. What she didn't know was that our neighbor, Ed, the retired accountant and bylaw enthusiast, had recently installed a new, top-of-the-line video doorbell. A doorbell with a crystal-clear microphone and a wide-angle lens. A doorbell that was, at that very moment, recording Karen's entire unhinged, screaming tirade. Later that evening, a new email landed in every homeowner's inbox. This one was from Ed. The subject line was simple: concerning behavior. The body of the email contained nothing but a video link of Karen, wild-eyed and shrieking about how she was the HOA, was the final nail in the coffin of her neighborhood authority. You can't rule a community that has seen you, stripped of all your power, having a full-blown tantrum on your neighbor's lawn. The next morning, I got a call from one of the other board members, a quiet man who had always seemed intimidated by Karen. "Josh," he said, his voice shaky, "we're holding the emergency meeting, we're voting her out, and we're opening the books, all of them." The call came from the Attorney General's office. They were ready. They had subpoenaed the developer's bank records, Karen's personal finances, and the server logs from the HOA's management company. They had taken my neat little folder of evidence and built it into a mountain. They asked me to come in one last time to walk their lead investigators through the whole thing from start to finish. They wanted to make sure they understood every detail before they presented it to the grand jury. It felt like a final exam. I walked into a large conference room with a long table and a projection screen at one end. The room was filled with serious people in suits who did not look like they enjoyed a good joke. The chief of staff was there, along with the lead state police investigator. They all nodded at me grimly. "Mr. Dunham," the lead prosecutor said, "walk us through it, as if we know nothing." I took a deep breath and plugged my laptop into their system. I was in my element now. This was no different than presenting a project plan to a nervous client. It was about making the complex simple. It was about telling a clear story with facts. "Gentlemen, ladies," I began, and the first image popped up on the screen. It was the official county parcel map, crisp and clear. Everything starts here, with the land. This is the legal recorded reality of our community. I used a laser pointer to trace the boundaries, highlighting the public access easements. These are the promises that were made when we bought our homes. Access to the lake, a shared community resource. Then I clicked to the next slide. It was Karen's altered HOA map, the one from their welcome packet. I superimposed it over the county map. The differences, once you knew where to look, were glaring. Switched to a 3D rendering I had built using a simple architectural program. It showed the slivers of stolen land coalescing into a single, prime, buildable lot right on the water. He wasn't just stealing land, he was manufacturing a multi-million-dollar asset out of thin air, using the HOA as his cover. Next, I moved to the money, the flow of it. I put up a spreadsheet. On one side was a list of every inflated invoice from Thorn Development to the HOA. "Here's the mechanism for the theft," I said, pointing to the outrageous numbers. $50,000 for algae assessment, $75,000 for dock stability review. I clicked again, and a second column of numbers appeared on the screen. These were from the bank records of Karen's shell company, the one named Lakefront Solutions LLC. And here is the kickback. For every dollar the HOA overpaid Thorn, roughly 50 cents, ended up here. I drew lines connecting the payments. A $50,000 invoice was followed a week later by a $25,000 deposit. A $100,000 invoice was followed by a $48,000 deposit. It was a clear, undeniable pattern. She wasn't just a corrupt HOA president, I explained. She was the developer's local partner. I put up a final slide. It was a picture of a signature. This is Karen Polson's signature from an HOA document. Beside it, I put up a picture of the signature on the incorporation papers for Lakefront Solutions LLC. They were identical. Then I added a third signature. "This last one," I said, my voice dropping a little, "is from the witness signature line on one of Thorn's land purchase documents. It's the signature of the county planning commissioner who approved Thorn's initial development plan 10 years ago. The three signatures were a perfect match." The room was silent. The investigators were just staring at the screen, scribbling notes. The lead prosecutor finally leaned back in his chair. "So, she approves his plans at the county level, then gets herself elected HOA president to manage the project from the inside, stealing land and money the whole time. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact." One of the other investigators, a woman from the white-collar crime unit, pointed at one of the kickback deposits. "That routing number," she said, "it's from an offshore account. This isn't just fraud, it's money laundering, racketeering." Staff looked at me. "Mr. Dunham, the governor was right. You didn't just untangle something. You pulled on one loose thread and unraveled their entire criminal enterprise." I just nodded, feeling a profound sense of relief. He was out of my hands now. I had given them the map, the numbers, and the motive. I had done my part. The prosecutor stood up. "Thank you, Mr. Dunham. That's all we need." As I was packing up my laptop, the state police investigator walked over to me. "You know," he said quietly, "we've been looking at Thorn for years. Always knew he was dirty, but he was slick. You didn't just find the crack, you drove a truck through it." The night before the HOA meeting, the air had the feeling of a gathering storm. The state police investigator had called me. Be at the clubhouse tomorrow at 9 a.m., he'd said. It's going to be a show. The emergency meeting I had formally requested was happening. The agenda was simple. A vote of no confidence in President Karen Polson and a motion to open all financial records for a full independent audit. The remaining board members, stripped of Karen's domineering presence, had folded completely. They had sent out the notice, and the entire community was buzzing. Tina and I walked to the community clubhouse the next morning. It was a crisp, beautiful day. The lake was sparkling. It felt like the kind of day for a fresh start. The clubhouse was packed. Every seat was taken, and people were standing along the walls. I saw neighbor Ed in the front row, holding a copy of the bylaws like it was a holy text. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. At the front of the room, the 3 remaining board members sat at a folding table, looking nervous. Karen Polson was there, sitting at the head of the table. She was dressed impeccably, her hair perfect, a mask of calm, icy composure plastered on her face. The meeting started. The acting vice president, a nervous man named Frank, called the meeting to order. He could barely get the words out. The first item on the agenda, he stammered, is a motion of no confidence in our president, Karen Polson. Karen stood up. She held up a hand, a gesture meant to command silence and respect. Now, I know there have been some unfortunate rumors and a great deal of misinformation spread by certain disgruntled individuals, she began, her eyes flicking toward me, but I am here to assure you that I have always acted in the best interests of this community. The chance. The main doors of the clubhouse swung open. 2 uniformed state troopers stepped inside, followed by the lead investigator in his suit. They moved with a quiet, deliberate purpose that silenced the room instantly. Everyone turned to look. The investigator held up a piece of paper. Karen Polson, he said, his voice calm and clear but loud enough for everyone to hear. Karen's face went white. The mask of composure didn't just crack, it shattered into a million pieces. I don't understand, she stammered. You are under arrest, the investigator said, continuing his slow walk toward the table, for conspiracy to commit fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. The troopers came up behind her. One of them took her arm, gently but firmly. Please stand up, ma'am. Karen just stared, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound coming out. The entire room was in a state of stunned silence. This was better than a movie. This was real. This was the queen of the neighborhood being dethroned in the most public and humiliating way possible. At the same moment, I knew other teams were moving. Another set of investigators was at Thorne's gleaming corporate office downtown. A third was at the County Planning Commission, arresting the commissioner who had been on Thorne's payroll for a decade. They pulled Karen's arms behind her back, and the sharp metallic click of the handcuffs echoed in the silent room. The sound seemed to break the spell. A low murmur rippled through the crowd, which quickly grew into loud, excited chatter. Some people started to clap. Neighbor Ed was on his feet, applauding vigorously. As the troopers began to lead a now catatonic Karen toward the door, her treasurer, a man who had signed off on every fraudulent check, started to look pale. The investigator paused and turned to him. Arthur Jennings, you're under arrest as well, for the same charges. They walked Karen right past me. Her eyes, which had been vacant with shock, suddenly focused on my face. The shock was replaced by a flash of pure, venomous hatred. The carefully constructed facade of the perfect suburban matriarch was gone. What was left was ugly and raw. You, she hissed, her voice a low, vicious snarl. You have no idea what you've done. You've ruined everything. I just looked at her. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I mostly felt a profound sense of pity. She had built a life on lies, and now the truth was taking it all away. No, Karen, I said, my voice quiet. You did. You ruined everything. Followed were quiet. The sirens faded. The paperwork did not. Karen Polson and Richard Thorne were booked. The county commissioner and HOA treasurer, too. Accounts were frozen. Subpoenas were everywhere. a court appointed a receiver to untangle the HOA and restore the stolen lake access. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt like a neighborhood. About a month later, the governor's office called. He wanted to see us. Tina and I drove into the city and were shown into a sunlit study. Governor Thompson looked thinner and stiff, but clear-eyed. "The doctors say I'm lucky," he said. "They also say if you hadn't pressed that wound, my luck ends on your garage floor." "Thank you is too small, but thank you." "I just did what your man told me," I said. "You kept your head in a storm," he countered. He turned to Tina. "And you? My staff told me about your broadcast. Protection is still talking about it. You grabbed the story before we knew there was one. That's a gift." He briefed us. Internal Affairs had ruled the rookie's shot a tragic accident under extreme duress, fueled by a malicious false report. The kid was off patrol, in retraining and counseling. Driving home, the world felt level again. The cul-de-sac was quiet. Ed watered petunias and waved like nothing historic had happened on our concrete. That night, I went to the garage. The Mustang gleamed under the fluorescence. The floor was spotless. I'd scrubbed and resealed it. No blood, no tape, no ghosts. Just tools on pegs and order on a slab. My church. What makes someone untouchable? Karen and Thorne thought titles and money made them fog. Untouchable is a story bullies tell themselves until paper and truth show up. A parcel map, a bank statement, a belt and a steady hand, a wife with a scanner app and a mean streak for petty justice. The receiver posted real books online. Refunds began. The board called a special election, minus Karen and her chorus. Ed, of course, chaired finance like a happy hawk. Neighbors walked the reopened access path and remembered why we moved here. Water, pines, quiet. A letter arrived from the governor. Formal thanks and a handwritten line. "The state owes you a favor. Call it when you need it. I set it in the top drawer under the torque certificates. Good paper to keep." The charges stacked. Conspiracy, wire fraud, money laundering, false report, inducing panic, obstruction. Tina leaned on the door frame while I tuned the carb. "Thinking big thoughts?" "Smaller this time," I said. "Idle timing. A drive." She slid a thick envelope onto the bench. Return receipts poked out like white flags. "What's that?" "Proof our mailers hit," she said. "Every bylaw notice we sent Karen signed for." I laughed. "Peace," I said. "And postage?" she added. I turned the key. The Mustang caught, settled into the low, certain growl that makes the world hold still. Outside, the lake went dark and calm. Inside, the tools hung exactly where they belonged. "Nothing," I said, and meant it. Absolutely nothing. And after everything, that was the best feeling in the world.